All right, and welcome back to Module 3 of the Miller System. So excited that we are at this point in the program because up until now, we've actually gone through a lot of content, a lot of ideas, as I'm sure you're nodding your head in agreement with me now. So, what have we done? Well, in Module 1, we talked about language. We talked about how your language affects your life, how your language will affect your ability to convert your clients. We talked briefly in that module also about this idea of how you being effective in your own physiology, in your own belief system, will directly correlate to the results you're getting closing, coaching, and consulting clients. We then talked about this idea of scarcity and how scarcity is the biggest enemy to you creating success within your business. We talked about how to get rid of that scarcity in your life, why it's critically important to put yourself in front of conversations like you're having at the moment with Jim and I. Then in module 2, we actually gave you the system that you're going to be implementing with us over the coming modules that is going to be really the key to you closing these high-end deals with clients on a single call without selling anything. As you know, we don't do that here at the Miller System. And so, really, where we are now in the program is we could begin to give you the step by step process of how we create authority, how we do the next step, how we do the next step, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, there's a really critical element that if you don't have this within yourself, you are not going to be effective in implementing the system that we're giving you. So, before we jump into that 4-phase conversion call, we're going to go through this key thing that I'm going to allow Jim to introduce, and then we're going to dive into that topic. And this is a transformational module, I can tell you that now. It's something that you may have heard about before, but you likely are not doing it. And if you're closing at anything less than 60 to 80% of the qualified prospects, I can almost guarantee you're not doing it. So, Jim, let's introduce now what that topic is, and then let's get diving into it.
First of all, it's very good again to be with all of you. I've looked very much forward to this time and this opportunity. I've had the pleasure of doing a significant amount of preparation to share this information, the experiences, and what we're able to glean at a scholarly level, right? Because one of our intentions is to be as intelligent and as effective as possible. And this is what coaching and consulting is all about, that we are the one that is basically the source of preeminence, as Jay Abraham says in his book, as one of the pillars of influence. So what I'd like to introduce is really one of the foundations of everything that we do, and that's state induction. State induction, the ability to induce state within ourselves and within another individual. And just to give you definition again, because definition is so critically powerful when we understand the terminology, when we become intimately familiar with the vernacular of persuasion, then we have this shift, this integration within ourselves, because what we focus on is who we become. Yes, if there's this consistent, this persistent focus on a singular topic, then truly our mind opens up, pathways of knowledge, epiphanies, whatever you want to call it, an enlightenment. All of this takes place, and certainly when we study state induction, then we truly are on the way. It's really the lever, if you will, of all influence, and that's the ability to induce state. Now, when you take the word induce or induction, you find that the etymological definition of this word, which has a prefix and a suffix, as most words do, the prefix in, which means into or to be with, etc. And then we have the second part, the suffix of the word, which is ducere, which means basically a power, right? A leader. And the word duke is one of the derivatives of this Latin term ducere. So what is it? What are we leading? How is it that we're leading? We're leading individuals into a mindset, a focus, an emotional state, a physiology, everything, all of the components that are required to effectively influence at an extraordinary level. Now, understand what I'm saying here. There's a difference between influencing and influencing at a level of mastery. Because we influence all day long. Sometimes, even unconsciously, we influence by mimicry, by people mimicking what it is that we're doing, or emulating or modeling what it is that we're doing. But what we're talking about is an extraordinary, almost extreme, intentional focus on this process of inducing state. Because when we master this, then we find that it becomes a force that really is almost undeniable. The ability to induce state. It's almost, it truly, what I have found in my experience, is without a doubt the most effective methodology of persuading an individual to act into what it is they've always wanted, always desired, or maybe even now for the first time desire, but for, right? There's always the but for in human interaction, in the formulation and in the exercise, the execution of negotiations, of sales, of conversations of influence. There's always that resistance. However, all of this is mitigated almost to an extreme level if and when we master the ability, the technique, the mastery of state induction.
That's awesome, Jim. Maybe you could give us an example or some examples of some of the states that we want to induce within our prospects.
Yeah, if you don't mind, let me back up just a second, Stephen,
Sure.
And I'd like to, first of all, propose this fact, and that is the first induction of state that must take place is that within ourselves. You see, before I can ever enter into a discussion, a conversation, a confrontation of state induction, I first must have already induced a similar state or even a more powerful state within myself. Because, as we all know, we've heard the axiom that sales is a transfer of emotion. Well, that's like calling the ocean a puddle of water, right? Because it's just an absolute oversimplification of what really is true. I mean, the ocean really is a puddle of water, depending upon one's definition of puddle. Certainly water is true. But anyway, what I do want to say is this, is that the first state induction must take place within myself. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is becoming, first of all, aware, becoming focused on, becoming congruent with that which I seek to do with others. Not seek to do to others, right? We don't influence to. We don't negotiate to. We don't consult to. It's always a with. And that's why we said earlier that this is a relational focus as opposed to a transactional focus. So some of the examples of me inducing state in myself is, number one, is to get centered, to find a place of privacy, of silence, where I can unduce, if you will, a word that I just made up, where I can unduce myself from all other thoughts or all counter-prevailing thoughts, or whatever the case may be, whether it even be white noise, but to get centered on what it is that's about to take place. Because this is something that must be taken serious. If this is something that is basically taken casual or taken willy-nilly or taken as something that is somewhat of an effort that it simply has to be done, then you won't be effective. I won't be effective. No one will. This is an exercise and a focus where I'm looking to clear my mind and now get focused on that which I am intending to do with my client. And I also must make certain that I find a reason to love what it is I'm about to do, that it makes a difference, that it is meaningful in my life, that within a matter of moments I have the ability, the power, the force. And it's not my force. Remember, it's something that I have availability to force that will change another person's life. that will transform them, maybe even, as Tony Robbins says, to unleash the giant, to awaken the giant within, right? Because this is who we are as coaches. It's who we are as consultants. We're able to unleash this force, this effort that truly has the ability to transform another individual's life and maybe even the world. So this is what I get associated with. That which is about to take place has an extraordinary ability of consequence, an extraordinary opportunity of transformation within the individual and possibly within many others. The other thing that I want to make certain of is that physiologically and at a level at high energy, meaning that I'm going to be available. Because if I'm at high energy, if I'm rested, if I'm well fed, then I can focus. Because really what I'm also convincing myself and making myself aware of is my ability to focus at a hyper level. To listen at a level that is an extraordinary listening, to listen to cues, to listen to certain idiosyncratic motions or emotions or words or sentencing or pauses that can tell me exactly where that individual is. Because remember, what we're looking to do is we're looking to influence another individual. This isn't simply done with a rational conversation, a sales pitch. We don't sell anything, right? So this is the first step. The first motion, if you will, the first impulse is to make certain that I have my state induced so that I am the most powerful believer in what it is I'm looking to offer, to transfer to another individual insofar as my services or my products.
That's great. And what we'll do in just a moment, Jim, we'll run through the three key associations, because you kind of gone through one of the associations, but we'll go through them in detail so that everybody can understand those. And then what we'll do after that is we're going to go through the process of how to actually assume state within ourselves. And then, of course, we'll go on to how to assume state within our clients. Does that sound fair enough?
Absolutely.
Right. And actually, one key kind of thing I wanted to pick up on there, Jim, is this idea of how contagious state actually is. You know, I don't know if people realize, and I'd like you to talk about this, how contagious it is. Like if somebody feels a certain way, how attuned are we to assume that same state?
Well, the truth is that all of us are assuming different states all day long. If you were absolutely aware of your state, the mental state, the emotional state, the physiological state, that you are at different aspects, different times of the day, you'll realize that our state is affected by everything, right? It's accidentally affected, it's incidentally affected, and so the ability to transfer state to another individual truly can become an extraordinary, for lack of a better term, an extraordinary weapon in your arsenal as you develop the system, as you begin to assimilate, to understand, to master this system that we work with, because it is an extraordinarily powerful tool. Because the beautiful thing is this, my friends, in order to effectively make your state contagious, the focus only has to be on yourself, not on the other person. You see, the more that I am aware and that I focus and that I maintain a state within myself, it will more powerfully transfer to another individual. There is no need for me to focus on the other individual. I can't force a state. Or if I do force a state, it's not a state that will be beneficial to me transferring my services and my products to another individual in exchange for their resources, right? So the focus is simply on me, not on the other person. You see, I'm not looking to sell the other person to be happy, to be excited, to be induced. No, I don't have to sell them into that. The selling days are over. We're standing up and doing the little salesman dance in order to get the other person excited, where we're trying to create fear and this extraordinary, ridiculous sense of urgency and immediacy in order to get the other person to buy, and browbeating them over the head. No, this is not an elegant nor an intelligent methodology for a consultant or a coach to become a master at conversion, you see. So we focused on ourselves, we maintain the state, and from that position we assume and maintain an alpha positioning, and the other will fall in line. Their state will be affected by ours, and it will become congruent with ours. It's just automatic. It's a human dynamic that we don't have to, in some sort of way, make a mess of by trying to control it ourselves. No, simply focus on yourself, develop, maintain, achieve a level of the state that is necessary in that moment of the conversation or the encounter, and the other person will, in fact, fall in line. It's like when I yawn, you yawn, right? Somebody please explain to me that dynamic.
Absolutely. So let's talk then, Jim, about the three associations that we run within ourselves to really strengthen our own state, and then we'll do the step-by-step process of getting into state.
Yeah, so the first thing that, as I mentioned, that I want to associate with is myself, my own state. And then I want to come to an association within myself of what it is that my product or my service is as a benefit to mankind, to other human. Like, why is it that I deserve to have another person invest their time, their hopes, their resources into what it is that I'm doing? If I can't enunciate that, if I can't speak of that very readily, in a very authoritative manner, well then, number one, I probably haven't thought about it in the past in a way that is truly required, where on the spot I can tell people immediately what it is that they will benefit from by associating with me. Right? So I want to become associated with those fundamental benefits, if you will, that a person is going to experience by being associated with me. I also want to focus on why it is that I am unique. You see, because if I do not have the ability to present myself as a unique value proposition, well, number one, it's going to be very difficult for me to convince others to contract with me as opposed to others out there that may be like me or similar to me or identical with me. If there's not a line of demarcation that separates me from the others that I'm aware of, that I can verbalize, that I'm in touch with, well then the prospects are not going to be able to perceive it either. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I'm going to lose is the ability to put value in my product and my service. Right? So I want to make certain that I'm focused on what it is that I have to offer that is unique. Why is my association unique? And one of the reasons, by the way, that my association with other human beings is unique is because of my ability to get in state and therefore get you in state, and from there to be able to create and achieve extraordinary outcomes. Because it's only from extraordinary states that we achieve extraordinary outcomes. Tell me, give me an instance where you know that someone has achieved something extraordinary without being in an extraordinary state. Right? It's very difficult. Very difficult. So the precursor to achievement is state. Understand that. Okay? Now, the other thing, too, is that I want to associate not only with the uniqueness, but I also want to associate with the immediacy. Why is it immediately important that an individual get associated with me? And that's the next association, this association with immediacy. The word now, which we're all afraid of. Why? Because we don't understand it. We don't understand the word now. We don't understand the dynamic of now. We don't understand the power of now, nor do we understand all of the elements that are associated with now and how it is we can overcome that which keeps us from experiencing this extraordinary dynamic. I got to tell you this right now, that when I learned and when I truly focused on, I was introduced and coached, because I've had coaches all my life, right? Because I'm not arrogant enough to think that I know everything, and I'm not stupid enough to think that I can get to the levels that I want to get without being coached, without having someone that has already been there, or someone that has a higher degree of learning in a specific area that will benefit me. So one of the things that I learned was I learned the power of immediacy, of now. And I was challenged to practice it, so that whenever I was asked to do something, that in the past it was always easy for me to put it onto my calendar, to make notes of it, to make a promise of it, to find a way to put it off until later, because there really was no expectancy of me to do anything immediately. Tell me, who is it? What force is expecting you to do everything immediately? There is none. There is none, until we get into a place of urgency where you better pay your light bill or your lights are going to get cut off, right? Or you better pay your cell phone bill or you're going to have your phone cut off. That's being extrinsically forced into immediacy, which is not beneficial. Well, it has benefits at some level. But I'm talking about an intrinsic force that forces you, that forces me to do everything right now. Right now. Right? So whenever somebody says, hey, Stephen, could you at some point send over to me some book that you mentioned to me? Could you send me the titles about those books on persuasion and marketing, and just send it to me by email? How easy is that to put off? How easy is that to put off? And it's not a life or death situation, but it is enforcing ourselves in focusing. Force begins with focus. Every habit, everything that turns into automaticity, which is something we'll discuss later, begins with focusing. So once I focus on the fact that everything that is requested of me, I will do now, immediately, in the now. And so what I do is I say, hold on for a second, Stephen, I'm going to send it to you right now. And I send it. I assure you, you will find at least 10 to 15 opportunities tomorrow to do something immediately that you would have put off in the past. And not intentionally, and not with any type of malice, or not with any type of, forethought of being irresponsible, but we just automatically do it. We have programmed ourselves to automatically fail, because that is a strategy of successfully failing, is not taking control, not appreciating the now. Because let me tell you something. When you are speaking to your prospects, when you're speaking to your clients and you present your program, you present to them the next module that you want them to purchase into, you want them to do it when? You want them to do it now. When you present that price to them, when you present the payment plan, when you present the program, you're asking them to make a decision now. Because let me tell you something. If you don't, you are sending them into a place of dissipating interest. The further away they get from the event, the less and less they are inclined to want to do what it is you requested. Why? Why? Simple. They're no longer in state. They're no longer in state. But if you're not a person that lives in the now, if you're not a person who has decided to no longer buy the BS of procrastination, of putting things off, if you've changed, if you've transformed, if you've purged yourself of putting things off, if you've purged yourself of giving yourself time later on to do things, if that's no longer an option in you, then let me tell you something, my friends. You will be able to close at a rate that will completely transform your entire business and yourself. So let me tell you something. We close at 60, 70, 80%. When I say close, I mean we, and speaking to our prospects and speaking to our clients, the conversion rate that we experience is at those types of levels. And it's very hard to believe. And it is hard to believe, and it will be hard to believe in you too when you actually find yourself doing it. But there's some extraordinary, like I said, there's no oversimplification. We're not calling the ocean a puddle here. We're going into the depths, down into the kitchen, as we said, to understand what it is and why it is and how it is we can master this level of conversion and never have to sell again.
All right, Jim, so we'll just talk about this now. Let's do the step-by-step process to how we assume state within ourselves, because we've talked about those associations. Let's just give a simple step-by-step process. It's basically going to be maybe 2 steps or so to talk about how to actually do this now, because we know the why, we know the what. Let's go through exactly how to do it.
Okay, well, let me tell you something. If any of you have been to a Tony Robbins event or one of Tony's programs, you know how to induce state. The first step is what? Assume a power position, right? Because it all starts with physiology. Physiology is going to allow you to get an energy flow within yourself, an oxygenation of your blood, right? This power, this flexing of muscle, this standing erect and tall and raising the chest and getting into and standing in state, right? And then, if necessary, to vocalize a powerful, if you have to yell, if there's a power word, if there's a mantra, whatever the case may be, if there's moves, if there's anything that is physiologically related that you find will get you charged up and get you in state. Let me tell you something. This is what those of us who work in or play in is even better, the field of influence and negotiation and transformation. This is how we induce state within ourselves. First move is a physiological move, right? And we can all do that. And we all know how powerful it is. But why don't we do it? I can tell you this right now. Every one of my coaching calls, every time that I am consulting, whether it be an individual, a CEO, a corporation, a sales force, I got to tell you something. We are always and constantly standing up, getting in state, making power moves, doing these primal yells, whatever it takes, whatever, right, to get the body physiologically, get the mind, get the energy flowing, right, getting aggressive. Right? Getting aggressive within ourselves. And then we ask ourselves, now we want to get into an association with our program, right? We want to create that certainty within a client. When a client hears our authority, when a client hears that we're certain that I am congruent with my program, that I'm congruent with my product. I'm not selling you a product. I'm offering you an opportunity. I'm coaching you into the intention of associating with me so that your life can be transformed, so that you can achieve what it is you've always desired. So I'm asking myself, why is it that my clients would want to experience my product, would want to experience my service? Why is it that they would want to do it with me, and why now? These are all critically important because these are the questions that must be answered within the call, within the encounter, in order for someone to say, yes, I want to associate with you. So remember, clients are coming to you how? Are they coming to you in state? No, they're coming to you totally out of state. You don't know where they are. Right? It's always important to ask them, basically, before we begin, how are you doing? How was your day? Right? Because I want to hear from them. I want to hear from them exactly where it is that they are in that moment. Because there's forces that they have encountered, there's situations that they have encountered that they're coming to this phone call that possibly could keep them absolutely unfocused. And an unfocused prospect will never become a client. right? They must be focused on what it is and where it is that we are right now. These are called extrinsic emotions. I want to know exactly what are the extrinsic emotions that they're facing in that moment when I encounter them. So I know where to bring them. So I know what I need to do, what's required of me in order to get them where I want them to be so that they can help themselves, so that they can be available. I want to know, what is the status quo that they're stuck in, right? What are the routines? What are the habits? What are the thoughts that these people are stuck in? Because people truly don't want to change. They've become comfortable. These are all survival mechanisms. These are ways that we find ways to cope, all coping mechanisms, so that we can find a way to exist within our own dissatisfaction. You see, cognitive dissonance cannot be allowed to intensify and to rule our lives, so we find ways to deal with this dissonance that's in our lives, and that is the dissonance of what we want, but who we really are, where we really are, who we want to be, what we want to achieve, what we want to accumulate, what we want to accomplish, what we want to contribute, but for who we really are, you see, and what we're really capable of, and what we perceive to be the obstacles in our lives. So I want to know, what is the status quo, right? And we want to shake them out of this comfort zone. We want to get them out of this comfort zone, and we want to also get them out of the limiting beliefs, the boundaries of their limiting beliefs. Because remember, it's the boundaries of our limiting beliefs that we live within. So if the boundaries of their limiting beliefs are such that they have determined and decided within their limiting beliefs that to invest in a coaching program would do them no good, because maybe they have no confidence in themselves, maybe they perceive that it's going to be too difficult, maybe they've had bad experiences in the past. I'm dealing with a client right now, a very successful client who's had very unsuccessful experiences with other consultants in the past. And he's just very afraid to go forward with another one because he's projecting into the future that it's going to happen again. You see, this is a limiting belief. These are things I must know, must be aware of, right? So this is how it is that I'm getting myself in state in order to, the steps, in order to then focus on inducing state in a client.
All right, Jim. So the final part of this module is then the step-by-step process that we're going to go through to actually induce a client into state. And just before you do that, I just want to let you know, listening into this program, we're going to do plenty of examples of actually inducing state so that you can hear how Jim does it in the next modules when we go through each of the 4 phases of the conversion call that we talked about in module 2. So just hang on for that, because that really will be one of the key things in this program for you when you hear Jim actually get somebody into state, and you hear the level he will go to get them to state. But before we get to anything like that, let's just go through the step-by-step process. And then, of course, you're going to have some activities to do in the PDF beneath this video. So, Jim, let's go.
Okay, so how is it that we get a client into state once we are in state now? Right? Well, first of all, it's very important, as we said, what is the foundation right now in this next process? And that is focus. To focus on the fact that I am responsible for everything that my prospect says, everything that he feels, everything that he perceives and understands. I take responsibility, and if I take responsibility, then I also maintain an alpha positioning, which, again, we're not in some power play, but understand this. We are speaking in the identity of the coach, of the consultant. We're no longer speaking from an equal positioning or from a beta positioning, because we're no longer selling. Those are the positions from which you sell. You sell from a position of equality, and you sell from a position of inferiority by allowing the client or the prospect to take the lead. We are no longer making ourselves available for a diminution in authority. We remain in alpha, right? So in order to remain in alpha, we must control every dynamic of the conversation, especially controlling exactly where it is we want to place the client conversationally. So I will get into a lot of this, even though it sounds a little deep, a little complex. Well, that's because it is, you see. When you're closing at 75 and 85% of the conversations that you're having, there must be a level of complexity that is unparalleled in what we might have done in the past and what's being done by the industry itself, right? By your competitors, your colleagues, whatever the case may be. So we want to focus. Now, the first thing we want to do is to, first of all, be empathetic with the prospect, meaning that we want to find out where that client is immediately. We want to find out where they are. We want to let them know that, first of all, we really appreciate being with them in the moment, that this time is very important to us, that we commit to absolutely being present and available and committed to this conversation, and we're seeking transformation. We're seeking the achievement of what it is that we identify as worth achieving. So I want to be empathetic in the sense that I understand that this person is coming to me with all of their hopes, with all of their desires. I may be the last stop of the train, right? As I am with, and sometimes in many cases, where clients have gone through the mill of various other coaches and various other programs and still have not yet achieved what it is that they're seeking. And I can tell it right away in their languaging, because the languaging that they still use is a languaging of disempowerment, a language of obscurity, and a language of misinformation, right? So I can tell that right off the bat by how it is a prospect speaks to me. So I want to be empathetic with the fact that this person truly is putting their trust in me. And they might be in a place in life that might be very uncomfortable, maybe very lonely, maybe very frustrating, maybe even at a point of despair. So I want to be empathetic to that. You see, I'm not focusing on selling this person, right? I'm focusing on executing into my system of the consultative conversion, the conversion of the individual from where they are into where together with me they have the opportunity to be, you see. So I'm empathetic. Now, I know that, again, my objective is to influence the client into participating with me in this process of change, this process of transformation, right? I want to make certain that they know this, that they understand this. And also, too, I want to make certain that I'm at a place where I am ready and available to influence this individual, right? When I say the word influence, the etymology of influence is, again, the prefix in. We can certainly understand that. Fluere means to flow, right? The Latin terminology to flow. So influence is a flowing in. Because why? Because the client, the prospect, is closed to a sales pitch. They're closed to a manipulation of themselves and their circumstances in order to benefit others but not benefit themselves. So it's very vital to understand how to flow into a prospect effectively so that they welcome you, right? So that there's this desire to allow you into their lives and that they allow you to take the authoritative positioning within the conversation. And it's important to pace the individual, right? We've heard this process, pace and lead. In other words, go down to where they are, go over to where they are, and then pace with them, right? Just walk with them. And how do we walk with an individual? We walk with an individual by questioning them. Finding out where they are. Again, finding out where they are extrinsically, basically, where are you in regards to what the world has done to you or with you prior to this conversation, And then we're going to find out where they are and create internal emotions that are the result of the conversation. So this is going to reduce the effect of critical filters that we subconsciously raise, right? Whenever we with a unique or a different or a situation that we perceive there might be someone that is looking to benefit at our expense, well, we raise these critical filters subconsciously, but we're aware of it. We become aware of these critical filters, and we speak into them, into the prospect, so that they're willing to lower them and to, again, to be receptive, right? We want to make certain that we create familiarity patterns with them, right? This can often show up in pacing. It can often show up in the way that we meet them where they are, right? We find out what their patterns of speech are. We find out what their patterns of thought, their patterns of sentencing, their patterns of volume when they do speak. We want to identify what those patterns are, how it is they ask a question, how it is they answer a question, so that we can basically fall into a synchronization with them, right? So that they feel that they're being met at a place of where they are, right? They find this resonance within us. And the result, we help them to do what they want to do. We influence them, right? We get them to a point where they feel influence, where state is induced, where they sense a familiarity, they sense a resonance with you, and they're willing to now step out of their status quo and be available for what it is that we're going to do within our conversation of conversion. Yes? Now, another thing that we're going to do is we're going to move backwards. We're going to move backwards before we move forwards, meaning that we're going to find out who they were before we find out who they are and who they want to be. Because who they were is, in fact, going to affect everything about who they are now and who they want to be, right? I mean, think of it. If you've had childhood experiences that were somewhat impactful in your life, whether they were beneficial or detrimental, that who you were has affected who you are now and who you will be to, in many cases, a very strong degree. So this is one of the things I want to do is let's look backwards first and find out what the immediate challenges are. Because we can identify what the challenges are going to be in our conversation by understanding who that person was, right? Now, the other thing that we're going to do, we don't want to assume that a client always wants to move forward, right? Why? Because this isn't a lot of times what they want to do. The key is to bring them backwards first, to help them possibly find resolution, to find a way to understand that which they've not been able to stand for many years. It may be a way to process something, a way to frame an event or an experience or a person that they haven't been able to resolve, right? So there's a need to find out, indeed, if the client has this need to first of all resolve that in the past before they move forward, right? We're inducing the state of pain and a cost and a disappointment. This is the key to moving them out of the status quo, right? To move them out of the status quo is to make them realize what it's costing their lives, how much pain they've been suffering, how much loss they've been enduring and encountering as a result of staying entrenched in the past, in this status quo. Right? Now also, too, we want to create a scale, meaning I want to ask a client on a scale of 1 to 10, where are they with their need to remove pain from their lives? And this will enable you to get a feel for where they are. It'll also get them to, at a conscious level and a subconscious level, commit to taking action and to being suggestive to that which will enable them to move, yes, to extract them. And then we want to future pace them, right? We want to future pace them basically in letting them know what it will cost them for not moving forward, what it has cost them, and what that cost will continue to be. And as a matter of fact, to bring out the fact that the cost becomes even greater as we get older, as our lives become more complicated. as we have more of an influence on other people, maybe children, maybe employers or employees, etc. But the future pace, and to see that that problems become progressively worse. And where do they see themselves emotionally, intellectually, experientially, at a place sometime in the future if they were to stay where they were, right? And so now they're prepared to listen to solution. Now they're prepared to listen to an idea, an enticement, an encouragement to possibly move them into that which they desire and out of that which they no longer are willing to tolerate.
That's phenomenal. And that may seem like a lot of steps, but again, fear not. It will all come together as we go through the 4 phases. And we're going to have a lot of printouts and stuff like that for you beneath the video to make this very simple. But again, Jim, as you just said earlier on, anything that's worth doing like this, it's not going to be easy. It's not something you're going to learn overnight. But I mean, if you want to be closing 60 to 80% or even 85%, as Jim was talking about earlier on, these are the key steps to doing that. And I think that just to sum it up, really, what I would say is that one of the most important things here is understanding that before we go forward, we must move backwards. And when we move backwards and we focus on the pain, we focus on the disappointment, we focus on what they've been missing out on all this time, that is one of the things that's going to help get that client into state, because they're going to immediately feel those feelings. And then we're going to be able to go forward from that point into a more like a fantasy state, like we talked about in the previous module. And you'll see how all this plays out on the call as we go forward into the system. This has been Inducing State. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next module.